My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm a realtor in South Central Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And today, what we're going to be talking about is what's going on as far as the real estate market right here in Anchorage. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty going on in the world right now as far as gas prices, inflation, and wars over the world, but we're going to try to give you as much clarity as we can over this part of the world as far as real estate goes, just so you can make better decisions for you and your family moving forward. So Anchorage is what we're going to be looking at today, and we're going to be talking about the residential market, the condo market, and multifamily market. We're going to be talking about what the takeaways are for you as a buyer, seller, or an investor at the end of the video. Before we get started, do make sure you give this video a like and subscribe so you can receive more information like this in the future. And let's go and jump into today's video and talk about what's going on in this market. Now, the first thing that we're seeing is that this time last year, there was about 230 properties that were available on the market. Now it's 157. So seeing a pretty sizable cut and the number of inventory compared to the year before, not nearly as much as what we're seeing compared to the years before. But we'll jump into that in the summary though. Now, the next thing that we're seeing is the number of properties that actually sold in this market compared to the year before actually stayed roughly about the same, or they actually came down just a couple, just by two, because the number of properties that sold this time last year was 172. This year it's 170. So slight decrease, not a whole lot though. Now, the average sold price, I know this is what most of you actually check in here for. So the average sold price did have a pretty significant increase year over day, because it went from about 370 odd thousand to about 417,000. So this is a pretty sizable increase for the average sold price for Anchorage. And there's some pretty good reasons for that on why that's happening. We'll talk more about that in the summary though. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is what brutal shellacking is going on in the condo market in Anchorage. Okay, so starting out with what's going on for the active inventory, it went from about 237 units were available this time last year. Now it's 76, if I recall correctly. So that is huge. So that's not even looking at a couple of years back. That's saying we are cut down by almost 2/3 from where we were this time last year. So that's pretty sizable. We'll talk about what the implications are for that in the summary though. Now, the next thing we need to look at for what's going on for the condos is that 92 condos sold this time last year. This year, it's 80. So still keeping a fairly healthy number of properties that are actually selling, but you get past this point to where you have so many properties that have actually sold, or there's been such a decrease in the inventory that you're seeing a compression and a reduction in the number of properties that can actually sell. Because you get to a point where you cross the threshold, you've got so little available on the market, that is going to start getting reflected in the number of properties that have been selling, regardless the amount of demand that you have. So yes, number of properties that have actually sold has decreased. Now, not surprisingly, the average sold price for condos did actually see an increase year over day, because it was roughly about 219,000 the year before. Now it's about 230,000. So that's a pretty sizable increase, not nearly as much as we would see with other property classes like residential or multifamily, but still a pretty healthy increase for the average sold price for condos in Anchorage. Let's take a quick break here real quick. So first off, for those of you who've been watching for a bit, you know that I have a podcast called the Alaskan Journey Podcast, where I talk about what's going on in the local market. And not only that, I actually do interview quite a few folks that have recently moved up here to Alaska and talk about their experience and any tips and tricks they have to make the transition a little bit smoother for you. Now, let's go ahead and take a look what's going on in the multifamily market. So in the multifamily market, what we're seeing is that the number of properties available this time last year was 122, and now it's 73. So pretty big cut in the inventory for what we're seeing, not nearly as drastic as what we're seeing on the condos or the residential, but that certainly is something that's sizable though. So big cut in the number of available properties for multifamily. That's the big takeaway. The next thing that we see is that the number of properties that actually sold in the multifamily market went from 28 to 32. So despite the fact we're seeing a ridiculous big compression in the number of properties that are available, we're still seeing a good amount and a slight increase for the number of properties that have actually sold. This indicates that there's still a lot of demand for investment properties in Anchorage, and we can talk about why that is in summary though. Average sold price for multifamily markets did come down by about $10,000 from about $497 to $487. So that's seeing a slight decrease, not a whole lot though, and it doesn't tell us a whole lot on what's going on in the overall market, just because with multifamily properties, it can be anything from a little duplex all the way up to like a 30-plex, commercial property. So not showing us a whole lot there. Now, what we're seeing across the entire board, this is your summary. What we're seeing across the entire board on the residential side, we continue to see a lot of demand because the inventory is low, interest rates are low, relatively speaking. I know they are increasing, but they're nowhere near where they were in years past. And a lot of people are just wanting to get something locked in now and ride the aggressive appreciation out. That's what savvy buyers are doing. Unsavvy ones are waiting for this mythical market collapse to happen. That's not really supported by any of the data. That's kind of wishful thinking, and a lot of people thinking they can predict the future based off what happened in decades past, and the fundamentals are not the same, and I'm not seeing that happening. The savvy buyers right now are buying and holding because they know that the market's going to continue appreciating up for the foreseeable future. Maybe not at the same rate. Hopefully things can kind of start slowing down here a little bit, but we're going to see it does continue to climb on the appreciation. For those of you who are sellers, great time to be selling. As you can see, you can get a lot more for your home now than you could in years past. Not only that, but you can get pretty good terms on your home as well. For those of you who are investors, Anchorage continues to be a pretty popular place to be investing because the cost of the rent is going up. Now, Anchorage is expensive on the property taxes, and it has a horrendous reputation for interfering with investors who are trying to do stuff on their property, specifically in Anchorage proper. So for that reason, a lot of investors are kind of pivoting more towards the Matsu Valley. Not a bad place to buy in Anchorage though, just something you got to be aware of, and make sure you're aware of that going into it. So this has been your summary. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions I can help you with, do make sure you reach out to me through my website down below. I'd be happy to chat a little bit and see how best I can help you.